had a realization recently.
Yep.
We talk a lot on the show about the changing value prop of events and trade shows and all that stuff. And I truly, truly believe it. But as I've gotten more and more involved with the property management industry,
Yep.
I've been going to those shows a bunch. And one lady who we were desperately trying to talk to told us something really interesting. She goes, you know what? I like to consume my vendors at my leisure. And what she meant to say was,
Great.
stop calling me, stop marketing to me. When I come to these trade shows, that's when I look for solutions.
Yeah.
Which blew my mind because that meant to me, I thought that people going to trade shows and conferences for discovery of new products was dead.
Yeah.
And that meant to me that it's really very much alive. I just want to talk that through with you, man. What do you think about that?
So I think it's a good observation, right? I mean, look, I think companies have to decide, you have to have insight as to the show, the third-party conference that you're exhibiting at. And that insight should be obviously lead to your type of clientele, people that are there, what are they doing there? What's the format of the show? So that's what you're talking about, right? Like there are shows where the show floor is just not that busy. People are not perusing, looking around. They don't need to come to your booth to see you. They're there for educational purposes. There are other things that are happening. So those things are important, right? And when you're saying is, there are still shows today. People do go to shows. They don't need to be there to see what's new, but people do like to do that in person. It's the same way I would say like outdoor experiential malls have not closed, right? Because just because you can buy stuff from Untuckit online, well, then why did Untuckit build 300 stores nationwide?
True.
Right? Because people still like that in-person experience. So I do think there's something there. I do think that that's happening. Where I would caution people is using your history as an exhibitor, as a sponsor, to understand just pragmatically what is happening. Are people coming up? Are they curious? Do you have normal booth traffic? Or is it like pulling teeth to get people to come to your booth? Like what is happening? And then you're looking at the show. What's the format, right? Are they in educational classes all day? Because I can tell you right now, if people are in educational certification style classes all day, they're not going to want to pound the show floor for the afternoon. So just things you have to recognize and understand.
So let's break that down, man.
Yep.
I would say let's start from the front end of it. I'm having a really hard time using Google these days, right? Like I feel like when I Google something, I get so much bullshit that I'm just like, I don't want to read through this stuff. I was trying to buy an e-bike the other day, right?
Yeah.
Like it's my birthday. What I want is an e-bike because I want to be a cool surfer guy with a surfboard rack on my e-bike. And I have to pour through so much bullshit that it's really hard. And I think AI and how much people have gamed SEO and all these different things really do lead to, what if I could just go somewhere for 48 hours and just like knock it all out and get really educated on? I would say car shows, some consumer stuff is probably good for that stuff. From like an industry down piece, what do you think? Do you think that there are verticals that tend to go this way even before we start getting into show formats?
Yeah, for sure. Right. So you have different industries. Oh, well, first, let's back up to what you were saying about being physically at the show. Like, I think there's still validity there. There's still validity. Now, there's certain industries, whether it's with products, right? Whether it's certain verticals of industries where there is a sense of like touch, feel, taste, see. You want to be in the mix of that. People still want that, right? And I think that's to a degree where shows excel. How they set that up, to me, need a new playbook, right? In general, I think you have a lot of show contractors and hosts trying to write a new playbook. Like people want to come for these core things, but we need to set up the field differently for them, right? So that maybe the interactions are better, so that maybe they're not burning as much time in different areas, so that they don't feel it's as pitchy or as salesy, or there's a lot of factors that go into kind of creating that. Industry, like you asked, definitely one of them. Are there industries where it's just going to thrive that people want to? I mean, look at CES.
Yeah.
I mean, CES is a monster for a reason, right? It's technology, it's innovation, it's the who's who. You feel like you have to be there. You want to see you want to see the AI robot in person, not on a screen, not on, you know what I mean? So I think there's different industries for sure. And then I would say the second tier thing I'm looking at is like the setup of the shows.
Yeah. So I would say if we're gonna stick with industry, and then before we go to setup, physical products seems like the low hanging fruit, right?
course.
Car shows are still gonna be cool.
Medical device.
Medical device. What else? Is you do a lot of grocer shows? Is that an important
Grocer,
thing?
like chemical compound type stuff.
Yeah.
Anything that really requires like some level of manufacturing and distribution where there's multi-channels. I think that stuff always has the ability to bring people together.
So there's
Yes.
direct to consumer physical products, but there's also the I don't sell direct to my
You have
consumer.
reps, you have
I have a manufacturer's
distributors,
rep.
you have
Yeah.
installers,
Yeah.
you have different style companies that
Yeah.
take a product and use it for various things.
Mm-hmm.
Show allows for everybody to get together, right?
Meaning the end consumer can come see what's available to them
Yeah.
beyond my manufacturer's rep's catalog.
And it allows the manufacturer with the rep, with maybe the distributor partner, with the end user, with maybe, using the example of like a Q-Pack with a fan where like a facility manager gets to come. You get all these different facets. It gets to come together. And that's where it's great to have like panel discussions, demonstrations. You're getting all these minds in the room to sit and come and discuss kind of what's important. Like I know our buddy John Wolf, right, with Lenovo, and what do they call it, Tech World or Lenovo Tech World they just had. And I mean, they ran a whole AI play on that event, right? So when you start thinking about coming together, AI, you would think like, oh, you wouldn't need to come together. But when you start looking at the way that they presented AI and the initiative innovation that Lenovo is putting out there, the physical interactions that they had with it, I don't care what anybody says, you can't do it virtually. You can't experience what they gave you from what I saw.
What did you
at
see?
home.
What did you see? So tell me what you saw to like think through that. This idea of like, because I hear that there's a fine line between a demo that I can do online and a demonstration that I can see and look.
Well, they
and
did a
feel.
fun thing where they had like an AI caricature creator, so it was kind of fun, a little bit different, which I think allows people to see either product or get engulfed. Like that's something that's simple and basic, but essentially like these are the things that are going on in the world that people are utilizing every single day. So it's humanizing it. Like that's at least how I view that. So simple products, something fun. And when you do it in person with other people, it completely humanizes something that is not totally humanized at this point in time, right? So that's where that physical engagement in person changes things if it's not an exact physical product.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So I think of physical products, direct to consumer. I think of complicated supply chains. I think of stuff that you want to experience in an engagement way. I think of an ICP that is so busy that generally doesn't want to like look for stuff themselves, but wants it all put together. I want to hit on that as like type of show in a second because I think there's differences there. But the last thing that I think of is what doesn't seem for me to be a discovery show. And the first thing that I think of for that is Marcom, right? Like I get the sense that all these like marketers on LinkedIn know what softwares are out there because they're like consuming content all the time, and they go to these other shows to socialize and to like meet other marketers and stuff like that, right? That's the other side of it.
I think there's something to be said for softwares being in person. I think software is obviously a huge piece of the event in trade show world. I mean, first of all, let's be honest about softwares, right? They're confusing. They're difficult to implement. They promise the world. They deliver half of the world, right? Like that's pretty much general consensus on software, right? So when you get people, it's not always like, oh, let's sit and like, oh, look at these microphones, right? Like it's, so you think about a software is, I'm using the example, John from Lenovo, about humanizing AI, which is what I think they did a good job of in different pockets. So now you're talking about softwares. Well, there's a lot of frustration around software, right? There always has been. There's curiosity. What does it do? My whole thing when we work with our software clients is like, how can you get intimate discussion with people about your software? And that's just not mean running a demo, but for new people. But that's also, what about your customers that are using it? How can you troubleshoot stuff? How can you fix things for them? How can you sit and answer questions? Because most of the time, somebody's looking at a software thinking, this feels like it's going to work for us, and I know it does all these cool things, but what about this? I'm worried about this. And I think when you're face-to-face, and you're running demos, say, hey, let me walk you through this, right? Let me put this up on the big screen. Let's think tank this, or let's let me guide you through on how I think this will work for you.
But is that discovery though, or is that in pipeline already moving the pipeline forward? Right.
I think
That's
both.
that's kind of what I think. It's like those like like HubSpot inbound for me feels much more like for in pipeline and for like creating peer to peer relationships and partnerships
Sure,
than
it
it
does
would be
both.
for like, well, I want people to know me. There's just better ways to get to people for that, right?
So wanting people to know you, I think that's like, I wrote about this the other day about this whole brand awareness idea, right? So, I mean, this goes back to Tavar. Shout out Tavar, right? Tavar said, what is brand awareness anymore? Like, what is it even, right? And I think to me, what it comes down to is size of industry, size of company. Super simple to be like Nike and be like, oh yeah, we run these billboard ads and we sponsor, a sports team and commercials. Like that's brand awareness. They're a massive brand.
Yeah.
That's the simplest thing. Oh, we have a billboard in Times Square, brand awareness. But that's where people's brains go to immediately when you think brand awareness. So when someone says we go to this trade show for brand awareness, your instinctual marketers like, that's stupid. You don't need that. Well, it's like, yeah, well, you're not fucking Coca-Cola. So yeah, I don't need that. But that's not why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So how big is your industry, right? And then size of the company, you go to a trade show. Well, what kind of setup, display, what is the vibe, what is the energy, what is the feel, what are people learning about your company?
Yeah.
You know how many times people have walked trade show floor and like been like, oh man, I didn't know you all did that. Or like you're creating brand awareness within your village, within your ecosystem. You don't need to create brand awareness for the world. That's Nike's job, right? That's Salesforce's job. That's Samsung's job. But if you are in chemical compound production and you specialize in fertilizer and something else, right? Well, you need to make sure that the continent that you live on knows who you are. And I do think that a trade show and an industry event is a very good way to get your point of view, your vibe, and everything that you are about across and get a face-to-face discussion with people. And you have to be conscious of that. Because if you do go there and put up a manila booth and don't run any activations and your team sucks in the booth and you're just there just to be there, well, then that's the brand awareness that you're giving out to people when they've had a touch. So they can come to any webinar you want. Your website could be the coolest in the world. You could have a really cool solution, but they could be like, man, those people suck. Like, I wouldn't want to work with them.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Okay, cool. So that is discovery per industry, kind of like what works, what doesn't. Let's dive a little deeper, right? There's a hybrid section here, and I think of event marketers, right? Like we recently had a lived experience of just like being at the watering hole, but the format not being right.
Yeah.
You wanna talk me through kind of like thinking of the format of the event, whether it's a discovery event versus a relationship building, partnership, and distribution event?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to be pragmatic and you have to be like, a little subjective in the sense that like, does this event fit the bill for what you're trying to accomplish? And does your strategy match, right?
Yep.
So like we've been to events, heavy education, right? Heavy, people are getting certifications. They're in classes all day. Well, when you're in classes all day, you don't want to walk the floor all day.
Yep.
Are they decision makers? Decision makers really like, they can walk the floor all they want, but they're not doing anything for you.
Yep.
So should you be exhibiting? You need decision makers. You need a show floor that has some energy to it. You need a show floor where people are like, I don't want to say rewarded for walking the floor, but that it's like a part of the process of the event.
How do you identify that?
I don't know. Like I said, I think it's a feel thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a, right? Like we have an industry event that is a smaller style event, not a third party big conference at all. But there is a little mini show floor there. And this year that event is being rethought. And I know the person that's rethinking it. She's super sharp. She's super smart. And she's kind of like standing in that, like, why do we have 30 exhibitors in here?
Yep.
This is kind of stupid.
Yep.
There's got to be a better way. And I've long thought, like, they're like, hey, head over to the hall and get your drink ticket. I'm like, this is stupid. I'm just going to go to the beautiful bar at the Hyatt and get the drink. I don't really need to go in there and get sold and this and that. So that's, like I'm saying, it's being pragmatic. And it's just thinking, like, does this really work?
Yeah.
And then making changes to it and now saying, hey, like you were an exhibitor and you spent this money. Well, what if I offered you this?
Yeah.
What if I was like, hey, you're going to host or you're going to get the ability to run X, and, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Or, hey, you're going to build out the coffee bar. It's going to be the stage, Pablo Gonzalez coffee bar.
Yeah.
And you can brand it however you want.
Cuban coffee, man.
Yeah. That's you. Yes. Yeah. High-strung Cuban, Colombian, beautiful coffee. But that's what I'm saying. It's a matter, to answer your question, it's being pragmatic, it's thinking. I don't really know if there's an actual answer to it.
Yeah.
Like there's an objective way of viewing it, but I think you have to be acute to those things.
Yeah, man, as you're saying all this stuff, it's putting me down a couple of lanes. One is, if this is a certification heavy event, then discovery looks different. If it's certification heavy and there's a whole curriculum, discovery is not so much in the trade show hall as much as, can you educate? Also, can you be part of the education and be congruent with the theme of the event?
So not even just certifications is one avenue.
Yeah.
The other avenue is essentially you have some events that are just like crazy keynote heavy, crazy speaker heavy, tons of sessions in different things. It just depends on the industry. It really does.
Okay. Then the next thing is, look at the event programming. Is the trade show component of it built in intelligently, right? Like, is there programming inside the trade show space, right? Like some of these have like actual stages where people are going to it, so they're naturally going to be there. Others of them have like trade show time, right? Like it's like, hey, the program is in the afternoon, trade shows all morning or whatever, right?
I think some events are trying to create more centrally located inside the hall, right? More like town hall style areas, lounges, things like that. And I think people are getting there. They just need to get more creative on like, you have the ecosystem is you have attendees, right? You have a host, you have sponsors, and you know what they're trying to do, right? Everybody needs to get a little bit of the piece of their pie. So how do you keep everybody happy? That's understanding what the attendee is there to do, what they're trying to do, what they want to accomplish. And, that's a lot of time it's networking. It's a lot of time peer-to-peer. It's education, learning, seeing what's new. And then you have your sponsors, right? You have people that are trying to sell them. They want to build relationships with them.
Yep.
So you just have to get creative on how that all comes together.
Do you think sponsorships is a good way to... Are sponsorships a tool for discovery?
Are sponsorships a good tool for discovery? What do you mean by discovery?
If I'm trying to be discovered, if I'm trying to get
As
known,
a company.
As a company, right? I'm going to a place where the majority of the market doesn't know who I am. Is a sponsorship a good idea? And like, or better said, when is a sponsorship and how is a sponsorship a good idea for that versus something else?
Are sponsorships a good tool for discovery? I would say yes and no, right? I think part of the problem people have with sponsorships is essentially that like the same playbook just gets rolled out year over year. I think there's a little bit to be said, like I've had this argument with people where someone's like, oh no, I don't want to just brand the tote bags this year. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, when I'm rolling around a trade show floor, those tote bags are fucking everywhere. Yeah. And that brand and that logo is everywhere. There is something to be said for that. I don't care what anybody says, right? Yeah. So I think yes. And then I think where that question leads me to is, how do we create sponsorships that create more meaningful touches for the sponsor and for the attendee, right? Like I can tell you, I've been to a couple events and I will not say the name of the event, but they do the shittiest job of it. The shittiest. It is like pay to play. I mean, you almost want to take a shower after reading the sponsorship thing, because you're basically just paying for these weird interactions, these crazy prices where it's like, you know what? If I'm really trying to build a relationship with somebody, I'd rather bring them through an experience. I'd rather bring them through something where I drive them value than they become curious about me. Yeah. So I think the game just has to change a little bit because, people don't care if you sponsor the lunch and you get a sign at every table and then you get up for 3 minutes and say whatever, hey, enjoy your lunch and blah, 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 and then you're forgotten, right? Probably not a great sponsorship.
Yeah. I saw our boy Andrew Smallwood do something like that recently, and I was like, I can't believe he's doing this, right? Like it was they crush at NARPM, right? Like that's where they've done all the things that we've profiled them doing. There's this other organization called PMI, and it was one of those things where they sponsored the big lunch. He got to get up on stage and give like a 2-minute spiel, and I was like, how's he going to do this, right? And what I saw from him was he got up there, he just identified who they were, and then laid out a point of view. Laid out this idea of...
Yeah, he's a sharp guy. So.
He's great, right?
Yeah,
so like he laid out this idea. It wasn't just like, this is what we do, hope you come by my booth. It's just like, we believe this. Yeah. And the people that we want to empower believe that. And we connect the dots there.
Yeah.
So if that's what you're interested, right? Like it's like if
Yeah.
you have a 3-minute speech at a sponsorship of a thing, it can't be about you. It has to be about the customer kind of
Yes.
thing, right?
Yeah.
So that gets me into just like what you just said. How do you actually make it meaningful when the sponsorship happens? And I'm wondering, I just was telling you what my new strategy is for a new client of mine, but I'm wondering like who have you seen do a really good job of taking a sponsorship and making it a meaningful interaction in some kind of creative way or things maybe
I
you've done or anything like that?
Tough to say on the sponsorship side, right?
Yeah.
I think just from afar,
Yeah.
watching what's her name, Catherine Frankelson with Money 2020, that show,
Okay.
they seem to be doing a very good job.
Tell me more about that.
Just with that show, I feel like they're driving more of an experience, right? Like they're kind of kicking out the old playbook. Just from what I can see visually on LinkedIn posts, people posting about it, her and Money 2020 posting about it.
Yeah.
It seems to me that they are very focused on the experience, changing up the way things look, changing up the flow of the event. A lot of things. From a sponsorship perspective, the best thing I've probably heard is talking to a couple organizers where they are saying they are going to their sponsors and saying, what would you like to do?
Yeah.
So what would be your option, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, like, it's an old play, but like, why not build out if inside the exhibit hall or somewhere near the event, the keynotes, whatever's happening, like some really like dope kind of swanky coffee lounge.
Yeah.
But the coffee lounge is branded your company.
Yeah.
And then you bring in a coffee company that does all these awesome like lattes and coffees and things like that. But then you also give people like quiet rooms to work. I don't know. Like I feel like and then when you come get a coffee,
Yeah.
you are entering them into like a raffle and you do some like a game. Like people are more than willing to do something when they're there. Like I think that's just a simple opportunity.
Yeah.
Like, but I think there's ways in that sense to
Yeah.
be able to do that people could find value.
I want to just like lob something over to you that I've been thinking about for a while, and now I feel like I'm going to go full ham on it. But it's the idea that whether or not it's your product or whatever, right? But some companies, like each company I feel that has reached a certain level of success, does something within their company well that may be valuable to other companies. For example, when I was working with Seal Shield, I was like, man, you guys are having this hard time, piercing through to end customers and you're trying to get their time, but you got this really kick-ass email marketer that you just hired. Why wouldn't you have a webinar or something like that where you're just like, I want to teach your team email marketing, even though I'm a medical infection control company, right? So when I see associations particularly that are hosting events, all of these associations are trying to figure out a way to like add more value to the people that join their association. And I think of like, all right, cool. So what's like you got Cody in-house. She's a really awesome marketer or event coordinator or whatever, right? But like, can you offer an association Cody teaching a class for like the people that have her title within the companies that are exhibiting, something like that, right? Like, is there some kind of sponsorship like that would make a discovery? And what would be missing for that? Like, I think maybe like if that's not congruent enough with the actual service that I provide, maybe there's a gap there.
I think it's a super interesting thought. So one thing I could tell you is the flip side of that is people paying to teach classes that the association spins off as a session and they're just a pitch. I think that's the biggest pile of bullshit in our industry.
Totally.
So it's like they come up with this cool title for a session and it's supposed to be about the industry and people learning, and then you walk in and it's a pitch for a single product. I hate that. It's my literally I fucking loathe it. I do. I hate it. Right? So the opposite of that would be more of a community factor. And you're basically saying like, we are here for this. What are some topics, some educational pieces and things that people would get value from learning? Right? So I can tell you again, referencing, we have a small association on my side of the industry, right? It's the Experiential Design and Producers Association, EDPA, and they are making changes to the event.
Yeah.
And one of the recommendations that I have made to the fine people there who will listen to me,
Yeah.
right, is they are encouraging, it has typically been an event for executives.
Yeah.
Okay. Executives like myself go. A lot of the suppliers in the industry who sell to us, their executives go, but their sales teams go. They sell us, they wine, they dine us. There's a lot of, interaction, education, things like that. It's a very good event. But now they're just encouraging everybody to bring their teams. They want you to bring your team. Well, bringing your team costs money, it's time, it's resource, it's away from work, right? Fine, no problem. And what I said was, if I'm going to bring my team to what you're saying, I need that value there. So I don't need the suppliers, and some who might even be listening to this, pitching me or my team. But what I would love is a roundtable discussion orchestrated by one of them with my team, theirs, and a couple other different teams and various perspectives.
Yeah.
That is ecosystem to me.
Yeah.
Right? Or
Yeah.
you have salespeople there. Why don't you bring in a sales trainer and say, hey, we've got a lot of salespeople at this conference, from the designer, the builder, the AV, the tech side, right? That's the ecosystem. We're going to bring in a sales consultant to teach a 90-minute course for these people here. Now I feel like I'm getting that, right? I want to bring my director of operations with me, right, Scott? So what are you doing for him? What's his track at this event? He should be with other director of operations, talking about problems in the industry, production, ops, what's going on, what's going wrong, what are they doing differently? Can they bring somebody in from some form of program that teaches a framework for ops, like what is it, Six Sigma Lean it's called, or something like that? So what you're saying, I'm describing it in a smaller scale event, right? Probably 300 people maybe. I think it absolutely can be done, and I think it can wash and wipe away some of the garbage that's done.
Agreed. And to me, the biggest takeaway, which is something I've taken away from hanging out around with you, is that sponsorships are just suggestions, right? Like the sponsorship, gold level, platinum.
That's a t-shirt, man.
Right?
That's a t-shirt that you should wear to an event. Sponsorships are just suggestions.
Talk more through that, right? Because what I'm hearing from you is you were just kind of like saying it from like the event side, but from like the exhibitor side, the event marketer side, the ability to provide that thing that's missing, because I can either have someone in-house that's really good at my company, that's good at that one thing, that can teach it, or go hire like you did at EMC, hey, I know you all want to learn about AI, so I'm going to just bring like the one person I know about AI, and I'm presenting it to you I'm presenting this, but I'm presenting this because I know that this is what you need, not because they brought it to me. So like maybe that's the intro or something.
I think the way I see what you're describing is two things. Are you trying to be transactional or relational, right?
Yeah.
Those are the two differences. I think events in the old playbook sets things up to be transactional.
Yeah.
It promotes transactional behavior, where to me, nobody wants to be treated transactionally, which is why attendees are like, oh God, get me out of here, right? Like I don't need another pitch. I don't need to go to the hall. I don't need to go to this thing, because they're being treated transactionally. To me, it's the change is up to host, association, someone running the event, set up the field for relational style engagement. And then if you are the sponsor, if you are the exhibitor, if you are the one that is trying to engage an attendee, do it to build relationships, not to be transactional. And that's one of the key differences that I see. Relational takes more time. It does take being able to identify, what do these people want? What do these people need? What are they seeking? And can you be the person to deliver that? Or just flat deliver them a really great experience?
And to me, it brings it back to the subject of the show of just like, is discovery dead? If they discover you through a tote bag and just see your logo, is very different than them discovering you as like, oh, these people put together this thing for me, they get me, right?
If I was doing a massive conference and I was going to be the main tote bag, Rockway was going to be the main tote bag, and I knew a lot of my ICPs were there, I wouldn't just put the Rockway logo on the tote bag, right? I don't know, like me, my personality. I like to be funny and direct. That's just my style. That's what I like. So I might like put something funny on the bag that's like, stop by the booth or recycle the bag.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? Like something direct, funny to draw the attention. Like if you're going to use it in that sense, or if you're running a campaign, if you're running a thing, put a QR code on that tote bag.
Yeah.
Right? Put a QR code on that tote bag, and then maybe put a funny meme or GIF in an image that's scanned over it that's like, scan me. Right? Like you're going to get people to scan it. Like you just have to get creative.
Let's workshop Rockway execution of a tote bag live right now.
I feel like we just did it.
I got a couple of ideas.
Okay,
if you don't mind.
Yeah,
I'm an idea guy, Matt.
I feel like I just did it, but go ahead, let's go.
Why not your POV? Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Events are a sales and marketing channel, not a cost of doing business on that. What would be the upside
If
and
you agree,
downside of
scan
that?
me. Like,
Yeah.
I just think you're trying to, in that style of marketing,
Yeah.
it is an attention, shock, surprise. What do they call it? Like, not jolt to the system, but it's like you're trying to throw a pattern off.
Yeah.
You're trying, right? Because people are at an event, they're doing what they're doing, and then they're like, oh shit, look at that. Like you're pattern interruption.
Yeah.
You're trying to create pattern interruption with something. That's at least how I would do it.
Yeah.
So don't waste the bullet, right? If you're going to shoot the bullet of sponsoring those tote bags, do something different that others wouldn't do. Now, don't do something different just to be the clown and that it's funny.
Correct.
Do it so that they're like, oh, okay, like, damn, that's cool. Then you'll drive people to your booth. And I'm sure there's limits on that through the shows as well, but
I could see the difference between two sayings for Rockway. That is, one is that with a QR code to the EMC framework for how to turn it into a channel, which, by the way, if you don't have, you should reach out, right? Because we've created this whole framework of how to like think through as a channel. Reach out to Matt for this thing. I could see that saying with a QR code that then goes to the EMC framework of like how to think through an event from soup to nuts, turning it into a marketing channel, branded with your stuff. That's then going to want them to go to it, versus a tote bag that says, hey, Rockway, we want to carry your strategy, not your junk swag.
There you go,
Right? Like, so that's like funny, but it doesn't really tie into something that like.
What if you did something, again, just on this QR code kick, right? Like, what if you did something, a QR code on a tote bag, and then that took you to a landing page, web page that basically gave recommendations and ideas for your week in that city.
Beautiful.
Right? Dinners, hey, the best breakfast, the best lunches, things in the hotels, dinner spots, outdoor seating. You know what I mean? Like, how can you be thoughtful?
Yeah.
That's, to me, that's, you have to, it's like I would relate it to, in a way, like flirting and dating, right? Mm-hmm. Like when I was, it's very different now for these kids because everything's on the phone. But like when I was, 18, 19, 20, 21, like you had to be funny. You had to get a girl's attention in person, right? Yeah. So you need some kind of shock of the system style joke. Like you have to be willing to go up there and put it out there. But then you have to have some value on the backside. You have to have like a good conversation that ensues, right? So it would be the same thing with bags or other things. So you do something funny, something quippy, something to garner attention at a trade show, but you have to follow up with value. You have to follow up with substance. It can't just be a big joke.
What I'm hearing in this conversation is that even when you're using the show to be discovered, it still needs to be a marketing channel. It can't just be like, well, bam, I'm here. Well, see you later. Yep. It has to be like, well, bam, we're here, and here's the next step, and this is congruent, and this is the objective.
I think the more anchors that you can, or rope that you can tie back to point of view, problems that you solve, or value for that person, the better.
Cool. So takeaways from this conversation have been for me is that discovery at events really is not dead. It can still happen. Yep. There is certain industries like physical products, complicated supply chain places where it works particularly well. And then for everything else, it's all about how you're approaching discovery, whether it is a show that's designed to like weave in the show floor, whether it is a creative sponsorship or a creative partnership with someone. But at the end of the day, it's got to go back to treating it as a marketing channel. Nothing ends at discovery. There's always a what next.
And don't forget, I loathe sponsorships that are pitches disguised as sessions.
And never do a pitch disguised as a session, or Matt will show up to your house.
I'll walk out of the room.
Don't don't put the flaming bag out with your boots.
I've walked out of the room before.
Yeah.
Terrible. I'm like, this has no value to me at all.
Do you say anything? Do you throw things up in the air when you do that?
This thing sucks.
Sucks.